a born entertainer. We all love you. That's a standard. But there's a lot of video content you've been doing for very early on in your career. You've been so comfortable in front of the camera. I think it loves you. From there to audio, where it's just one medium, how was the shift like for you and how did that go for you?
So I've actually been on TV from the time that it was in black and white.
Beautiful.
So been on TV since then. But the thing is that what a lot of people don't know is I started my career on radio. So I was a teenager and I was on Times FM in Delhi. In fact, my co-founder of Spoken, Roshan, was the big star radio jockey in Delhi, and we all used to listen to him and said, we want to emulate him, we want to be like that. So I started my career, it was a few years, short years on FM radio. So I learned everything about live performing there. And then Channel V happened, and then I went kind of video. So for me, doing 22 Yarns on Spotify was a homecoming of sorts, doing audio. And the strange thing is that the first season, we did audio and video.
Nice.
And then COVID happened, and for the subsequent seasons, we did only audio. So it was like a big pandemic had to happen for me to completely relive that experience of my teenage years. So I loved it. I'm an audio first boy, I always say. I still get a little shy in front of the camera. I do, honestly. But in front of a mic and in a sound studio and with those mixers and with that music, I really feel at home. So I was very happy when Spotify said, do this podcast.
That's beautiful. I think 22 Yarns fans in the house. Doesn't need another introduction. I think this stat also reflects in the numbers you're doing, so no doubt about it. Talking about numbers, I remember reading a post recently where you'd written to Anuj asking him to be a guest on your show, and you'd posted about it, saying that, when nobody was responding to your emails, that's when he reached out, and that was one big breakthrough for you. And you've been a name that is synonymous to podcasting in the country today, because I know anybody who attended the Spotify podcast workshop last year remembers everybody spoke about you. Everybody was talking about he's doing such amazing work. When you started podcasting, did you know where you were headed? Did you know this big is how it's going to become? And what was it like for you?
So I'll tell you how I started podcast. I never wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to give speeches around the world, and that's all I was doing. And then I met a guy named Gary Vee. How many people know Gary Vee? So I asked him that, can you spend like an hour with me? He said no. And I said, okay, I run one of the good podcasts in India. Can you come on that? And he said, how many episodes have you done? I said, none yet. So it's like, I love your confidence, but I'm going to be 16th guest on your podcast. I won't be the first one. And that's how I started podcast, because I did like 15 episodes back to back just to meet him. Wow. I fell in love with that. Wow. So that's how my podcasting journey started. Once I started doing that, I did it for the first time. My first name of the podcast was Voices with Raj. That was like 7 years ago. Then I shut down after 16th episode, after doing it with Gary. Then I moved 3-4 years ago. I started another, which was Mind Your Own Business. Then I shut that down again. And then 2 years ago, I started figuring out, because this time I found a purpose where in pandemic, I was like, how can I live and love better? And I wanted to know that. So I wanted to learn. I was like, instead of just me learning, it'd be better if I ask people in front of the public and show my vulnerabilities. And that's how the whole podcast started. And that's why the name was Figuring Out, that we're figuring out how to live and love better. And that's the whole podcast about.
That's beautiful. I think this one's working fine for me, so I'm going to use it. I think there are a lot of creators in the room, and I think hearing this was very important. How many of you started your first blog but just stopped posting on it? Show of hands, we're all honest here, right? And how many of you have been ever since planning to restart it, putting it on your vision board for the year and not doing anything about it? One thing that I want you to take away from this conversation would be that go back home, just read the first episode, maybe write to Gary Vee, and everything will figure itself out. Perfect.
Also, one quick thing, right? Start changing your names of your podcast. Every time there's a new name, you're more excited to do it.
That's damn nice. That's actually very interesting. Just hack your brain, guys. Just hack your brain. It's just a stupid thing. Coming to the next question, both of you had some iconic guests on your shows. One of the million questions that you always get asked everywhere is what's your favorite episode on Breakfast of the Champions? But I want to ask you, what was that one episode you were really scared of shooting? Like you did not know if you're going to get it right, get it wrong, how that's going to go?
The first one. I was very scared when I was shooting the first one. That was with Gary Kirsten. I stayed up the whole night hoping that there would be a ping on my phone with him cancelling. Right? Because I kid you not. I mean, it was scary for me because not only was I starting a new show, but I was also producing it. So I was nervous across the board for so many things. I had visually designed the show, so I didn't know whether that was correct. I was literally flying on a wing and a prayer. Like, nobody knows. This is what I want to tell you. When you're doing the first thing, you don't know. But don't worry about it. Don't have that Mughal Azam complex that you're going to make a, grand magnum opus in your first attempt. You'll figure it out slowly. You'll get there. You learn if your first episode and your 20th episode look and sound exactly the same, then you're doing something completely wrong. So I can guarantee you that from episode to 1, 10 will sound and look different, 20 will sound and look different, 30 will, because you learn. It's not just AI that self-learns. You will learn. You will watch. You will go, this camera angle is wrong. I asked the wrong question. Maybe this was the wrong point to bring up. Maybe this edit is wrong. So you learn. So I think that if it scares you, it's good. If it scares you, you must absolutely do it. I have done a lot of things in my life that have not scared me and they've been kind of okay. And I've done very few things that have scared me. Breakfast with Champions being one. 22 Yarns, the podcast being another one. That scared me a little lesser because I'd done the previous show. But it still scared me. But the fact is that you get over it. And as soon as you get over it, the second one becomes slightly easier. The third one becomes easier. And that's how you go. So that's what I tell people. I was very scared before the first one.
Moving to the last question, leveling up. Leveling up also means being uncomfortable, being pushed out of your comfort zone. It's easy, like Gaurav said before, if 1 to 10 sounds same, you're doing something wrong, right? It's easy to keep that going and hit a plateau and move nowhere. But I think growth happens when you level up, when you go into that uncomfortable zone. So what does leveling up mean to you? And how do you get yourself through that hustle of sorts?
So I'll tell you what I did with 22 Yarns, which was my Spotify podcast. And it was the first Spotify original that happened out of India. So big thank you to the team at Spotify. Thank you for the faith that you showed in it. And hopefully more than my family heard it. So it paid off. But I hit that plateau. So I did 4 seasons. I did 50 episodes. And I felt I hit that plateau. I also feel as an artist, as a performer, as a storyteller, saying yes to things, equally important is knowing when to say no. So at that point in time, I felt like it had hit a plateau and I was not being able to work around it, right? So I said, okay, this would be a good time to take a break from this. Right? We have multiple stories inside us. We have many things that are happening. It's okay to take a break from it. It's okay to take a break and say, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is. And say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to not even think about it. I'm going to just live my life, do the other things that I'm doing. And I'm going to come back to it when I don't have a plan, when I have a renewed energy and enthusiasm for it. So only in the last few months have I felt that joy again, that I want to do a long form cricket podcast. I want to tell human story. It's wrong to call it a cricket podcast. It's a human story podcast with the background of cricket. And I want to do that again. And I'm feeling the enthusiasm for those stories. So I am now ready to restart that podcast. And it's so cool we're having this chat today because I'm actually recording the first episode on Wednesday. So we're going to come back. And Raj has just given me an idea, and I'll give you full credit for it. I was thinking of calling it 22 Yarns with Gaurav Kapoor, the same name and going ahead. But from what you said right now, I think I may just give it another name. I think I may just do that. And it'll be a shout out to you if I do that.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's beautiful. I think spoken is just this. Spoken is just meeting the right people. Everything here is a sign in some way. So if you see this conversation, consider it as your sign to level up, go out, start a new podcast. Coming to Raj, what do you think leveling up means to you, except for changing names?
Okay. That's my way of starting again or leveling up. But I'll tell you very real thing that I do every time I want to grow more. Okay. Because first thing, like he said, like there's a plateau. I don't think like there's any plateau I've hit because I've just started. I'm very, like I started my first business and speaking and all that like 10 years ago. So I'm, abhi bahut bacha hai mujh mein. So I don't think like plateau is coming. But here's what I do. Every time I feel like, let's say my audience is not enjoying, I look deeper inside me. What are the other problems I have? So my whole podcast is about figuring out how this young person can achieve all his dreams, right? That's the whole idea behind it. So one time when I do startup, I felt like, hey, everybody is done with startups. I'm also getting the hang of it. What are the other problems I have? Okay, the other problem I have is I don't know what the fuck is going on in this country, right? So I want to know that more. Then I was like, okay, now that I've already started knowing that, what's the other problem? The other problem is I can't sleep on time. I've bad health and I eat junk almost every time. So I want to get better. I want to be healthier. So that's another problem. And that's why now I knew like more or less all the podcasts are about health. So every time I feel there's something that people are not enjoying, I look deeper with what are the other problems I have. And that's how I think I have always leveled up my podcast.
Thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of this conversation. If podcasting ever feels like a jungle to you where you want to think or not think, Spotify for Podcasters has some great resources. You can go check them out. They do workshops, they do trainings. There's a lot that happens. And also you can reach out to them separately. They're very reachable online as well. You can find Gaurav at Gaurav KAPS Cups. That's right. And at Raj Shamani. And I'm Lakshmi. You can find me at @literary chills or just loitering around the festival grounds, either or what works for you. And thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. And I think at this point I'd like to call Priyam back. Thank you so much. Thank you, Raj, and thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you. Excellent. Very well.